Good afternoon, this is Rick from Bike Fitness Coaching with a little video today requested by several of our members from the Wahoo Facebook Kicker Bike group. I've recently had to replace the bottom bracket bearings on my Wahoo V2 Kicker Bike, and several people have asked what bearings I chose. There's two recommended. There is the BBMT 801 threaded bottom bracket from Shimano. There's also the BBMT 501 threaded bottom bracket from Shimano. There's really no difference, especially when riding a indoor bike, that you're going to really notice. What you will notice, which we're going to discuss further into the presentation, is the seals that seal the bearings from the outside elements are different on the mountain bikes compared to the road bikes. Little bearing history. The old cup and cone or the old bottom brackets from Dura-Ace. They were also in headsets, hubs, and some of the newer wheels from Shimano still use the cup and cone technology. There's the sealed bottom brackets that you're going to be seeing most in the industry, which are used in bottom brackets, headsets, hubs, and pedals. And there's the old style cartridge bearing bottom brackets that were in the Shimano 600 and the Dura-Ace, which then when they transitioned from the cup and cone bottom bracket Shimano to the cartridge and eventually the sealed bottom brackets. You'll notice that the hub, so this is a cup and cone for the wheel bearings, this is cup and cone for BB bearings. They're essentially the same. The cup is the inside of the hub, though the bearings roll on the inside of the hub as the outer race. And the bearings also rotate on the cone, which is considered the inner race. And you have the same basic technology on the bottom brackets, cup and cone. The bearings here is the cup, you could say, and this would be the cone, or vice versa if you wanted to stay into it's sort of backwards, but this would be the hub side and this would be the cone side. Same technology. Most bearings today are what we call deep groove ball bearings. They are named because there is a deep groove on the inner race and a deep groove in the outer race that the balls sit in and rotate around. There are basically two types of loads on a bearing. A radial load, which is applied directly on top of the bearing, which is going to squish the bearing. And there is also an axial load that is a side load. I have several examples of ball retainers. Some people on track bikes tend to remove the retainers and add an extra ball. Basically, their argument is that there is friction on each one of the ball retainers that the balls have to rotate through. If you remove this, overall there will be less friction on the balls. Here's a different type of ball retainer, and yet a third, more of a plastic type of ball retainer. Deep groove ball bearings, there are steel bearings, which are considered steel balls, steel races and rings. There's hybrid ceramic, which you have usually silicon nitride balls and steel races and rings, and you have full ceramic bearings, which are silicon nitride balls and silicon nitride races and rings. Here is an example of a 6806, which is a BB30 bearing from a company called SKF, very high quality bearing. Here is one of the bearings pulled apart. You'll see the individual balls. Here is the ball retainer, or what some people call the cage. You have the inner race, the outer race, and you have the seals. That's basically a bearing minus the lube. Now for those engineers out there, here is a 6805, which is predominantly called a Shimano bearing or Shimano size bearing, 25 millimeter inside diameter, 37 outer, and 7 millimeter wide. A 6806, which is 30 by 42 by 7. And here is a Look 6810, which is 50 by 65 by 7. So where do these numbers come from? A 68XX, a 6 means a single row deep groove bearing. The 8 is ultra thin series, which would be 7 millimeters, and the XX is the bore. Up to 3, if it was a 6800, it would be 10 millimeters. 6801 would be a 12 millimeter bore. And you get up to 6804, and then you start adding the code plus or times 5. The closures would be Z is 1 shield, ZZ are 2 shields, RS 1 contact. You've heard of 2 RS as a standard in the bicycle industry, 2 rubber contact seals, etc., etc. So let's get into some common terms. Everybody's heard of ABEC. Everybody's heard of ball grade, bearing races, clearance, lubes, and seals. ABEC, what it is. ABEC is basically tolerance. ABEC is Annular Bearing Engineers Committee. It's a USA practice for rating tolerance and accuracy of the bearings. There's 5 levels. ABEC 1 is the lowest level. All 5 levels are considered precision bearings. The higher the ABEC rating, the higher RPM that you can run the bearing. So in other words, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to run an ABEC 7 or 9. Down here, very tight tolerances, ultra tight tolerances on a bicycle wheel or bottom bracket that is basically rotating at, let's say 100, 110 RPM. These are made for tens of thousands of RPMs to run. You can save a lot of money if you go with an ABEC 1 or 3, or at the most a 5, ABEC 5 for bicycle applications. ABEC, what it isn't. The ABEC rating does not specify basically the quality. It doesn't factor in the materials, the manufacturing performance, especially load handling capabilities, ball precision, materials as a Rockwell hardness. For example, you could get it's basically considered a balanced bearing. So if I'm going to be running high RPMs, I want everything to be balanced inside of the bearing itself. So theoretically, I could have a mixture of ceramic balls, brass balls, steel balls. As long as it's a balanced bearing, that's all that matters. We'll get into ball grade, which is a more precise, it gives you more indication of the quality of the bearing in general. As an example, do I really need an ABEC 5, 7, or 9 in a bicycle application? A 61806, which is considered a BB30 bearing, a steel angular contact bearing, has a limiting speed of 35,000 RPM using a grease lube, or 47,000 RPM using an oil lube. How many people can spin a crank this fast where you would need an ABEC 5, 7, or 9 bearing? An example, a ceramic angular contact bearing is 43,750 using grease, or 58,750 RPM using an oil lube. You're going to be spinning, maybe these are for the track cyclists among us. The ball grade, which is an ISO 3290 standard, the overall quality and precision of the balls, which means the roundness or spherical deviation of the ball. The lower the grade, the fewer defects, lower as in number, this grade number, such as flat spots, pits, soft spots, cuts, etc. Basically, a grade 3 ball is sphericity is about 3/1,000,000ths of an inch. A grade 5 would be 5/1,000,000ths of an inch, etc. A lot of the Chinese ceramic bearings, hybrid ceramic bearings, you'll see will agree with grade 3. Here are the standard ball materials for bicycle applications. You'll see ceramic, usually silicon nitride. Metals, you'll see chrome, low carbon, or tungsten carbide. Some of the stainless steel bearings, and they also make plastic and glass balls. Coupled with the ball, you also want to have the bearing races match. Inner and outer races or rings or cones. Again, this is the deep groove. Here's a race, outer race, inner race, ball retainers and the balls, a cup and cone application. Essentially what you want to do is, again, have the ball grade match as closely as possible to the polish of the races to achieve the smoothest ride and rotating possible. Surface roughness and roundness. This is for the races themselves. Several years ago, I took a 6806 bottom bracket and compared an SKF grade 5 with the Chinese hybrid ceramic of grade 3. The results were the SKF was fairly matched of a grade 5 ball with grade 5, let's call it equivalent races. It ran smoother and better immediately. Everything was matched. It ran extremely smooth. Chinese, they claimed using grade 3 ceramic hybrid ceramic balls, silicon nitride balls, but they use, to keep the cost down, they use a lower grade 200 or worse races. It took 250 plus miles to break in the bottom bracket. When I tore it down, there was no noticeable wear. The grease was dark gray from the balls were polishing the race, so it didn't start getting smooth until after 250 miles because of the great mismatch between the smoothness of the grade 3 ball and the roughness of the races. Conclusion, they ran smooth for 10,000 miles and they were smooth at 10,000 miles. Ran smooth for 10,000 after the break-in, and they started showing a lot of wear and tear after the 10,000 miles on the Chinese grade 3 hybrid ceramic bearing. Another term you will hear that's really not mentioned a lot is clearance, but it is important to a lot of the manufacturers. You'll have a radial clearance and an axial clearance. The grades of the classes of clearances, C1, 2, CN is where most manufacturers try to meet and match their products to the bearings. Example, if I'm building a wheel, the internal of the hub that the sealed bearing is pressed into, I want to match the compression of the hub so it holds the bearing in tight enough, but not too tight to compress the bearing into the balls, which will prevent it from rotating. So most manufacturers try to hit the CN or C3 number. Now, some of the tricks the manufacturers use, I don't know if they're still doing it, but there was a wheel manufacturer that was basically compressing, making the hub itself so tight that if a mechanic pressed a CN bearing into the hub, the wheel would not roll because it was too tight. So you had to go with a C5 bearing to make the bearing work, or buy the overpriced bearing from the manufacturer. And again, for the engineers out there, here are the actual max and min clearances for these bearings, 6805, 6806, and 6810. Another important factor on bearings, let's talk about lubes and fill. NLGI is a term you will hear. Stands for National Association of Lubricating Grease Manufacturers Incorporated, nlgi.org if you want more information. Here are the actual numbers. A grease is a base oil plus thickeners plus additives. And here is a grease characteristics guide you can look at. The best bicycle bearing lube or grease, again, it depends on what you want to do. The track riders will use oil. The road bikes, I recommend in the bearings use an NLGI 1.5, which is best. It's right in between these two. It's a viscosity where it's not quite oil, but it's not as heavy as a grease, and it's not a sticky substance like some of the heavier green colored greases that are out there. It's very soft like butter, and it rolls extremely well. The best fill, or how much grease to pack into the bearing if you want to redo your bearings. And again, I recommend, and Shimano recommends, hey, if you got a Dura-Ace or Ultegra bottom bracket, they're cheap enough. Just when they wear out, unscrew them or pop them out with a press and throw them out and just put them new ones in. You can fiddle with rebuilding them if you want to. You have to take them completely apart, flush out the old fluid because you don't know what they're using, and put in your new fill. Indoor training, I recommend using 100% fill. Why? Because if you run 100% fill in the bearing, it will prevent the sweat from getting into the bearing and contaminating or rusting the races. Seal bearings for a regular road bike is 25 to 40% fill. Cup and cone is an adequate amount to cover everything. So this leads us all the way back to the closures and seals. I've added Enduro has basically a good option on their bearings. They have a what they call an LLB, which is a light contact seal primarily for road bikes. And what Enduro has done is they put a lighter contact seal on the inside and a little heavier contact seal on the outside for spin bikes, for mountain bikes, etc. That'll help prevent dirt and debris from entering the bearing from the outside, but it won't limit. By having a light contact seal on the inside, it limits the amount of friction the bearing will exhibit or come into contact with as you're pedaling. There's also medium contact, which is dual seals, which is a little bit more increased seal pressure for the bearing. The best uses for these seals are MTB, cross, gravel, inside cyclists that use on trainers. I've added this bearing for a while on my kicker bike. I've tested it on the kicker bike, and this one runs extremely well. Actually, it is this seal on the outside and this seal on the inside. You just got to contact Enduro or your local distributor, and they can tell you which bearing this is for a Shimano type application, or a 6806, which is a BB30 application. So we're coming down to, what do these bearings cost? I gave you some examples of the 6805. So what about 6806? When I test rode for Cervelo years ago, I know that they were paying about 25 cents a piece for their BB30 bearings for all of they bought so many bearings for their bicycles. AliExpress, you can buy the same bearings for about 84 cents to $6, which is the Chinese high quality bearing. They also make hybrid ceramics, which are about $16.75, or full ceramics for $33. I don't recommend these. These are too brittle. If you stand up and do a sprint, you more than likely will crack these bearings immediately. Enduro, their steel bearings, high quality, $13.25 to $42, and they do have a hybrid ceramic for $53 to $121. SKF, again, this is for each bearing on here and here. SKF, $255 to $275. Well, SKF is one of the top manufacturers, along with NSK, NTN, FAG, and Timken. Why the high price? Well, it's because of the quality of SKF. How good are they? They're as good that Ferrari, the 2025 SF25 F1 Formula One car, uses exclusively SKF bearings on all of their rotating parts, engine, wheel, etc. A summary: most modern road bicycles now use seal bearings for headsets, bottom brackets, wheel bearings, etc. Cup and cone are still used in some wheels and pedals. ABEC is not really a factor in bicycle bearings. ABEC 1 and 3 are good enough. Ball grade 3 is not necessary. Grade 5 works perfect if races are highly polished to match. Most 1/8 inch steel balls note, are produced. If you were to buy steel balls individually, they're about a grade 25 precision. They're still going to work okay. Regarding bearing races, hybrid ceramics are no better than high quality steel bearings. Clearance is important to match to the application. Be aware of the manufacturer's tricks we talked about. NLGI 1.5 lube is best viscosity for most bicycle bearings. Any heavier or thicker and the grease will not allow the balls to roll. Instead, the grease is going to be so thick that the balls will be basically sloshing through the medium and not rolling. So you're going to be adding resistance not only with a thicker grease, but the balls are not rolling. Full contact seals are important for indoor training as well as outdoor dirt, rain, mud, like mountain bike, gravel, cross, etc. Thank you for your interest. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section and we will get to them. Thank you again.